PXN V9 Gen2 promises upgrades to a budget-friendly steering wheel, but is it a successful sequel or a subpar showing? Here are the pros, cons, and whether it is worth buying. Some moons ago, I did a comparison of the V9 versus the V10 and concluded that the V9 was more suited to casual driving fun for younger gamers or games where precision and pace are less required. Dearest SnowRunner being a prime example. Having already reviewed the V10 successor known as the V99, I am now here to shed light on the V9 Gen2, which in the PXN range sits above the V900 Gen2 and V3 Pro and below the V10, V99, V12 Lite and top spec V12. Continue watching to see the unboxing, setup and driving impressions of various games on PC and Xbox. Subscribe to the tribe. Speedy disclaimer, Chinese manufacturer PXN sent me the V9 Gen2 and paid me to make a video, but had no input on my ever grumpy journalistic views. Now before we get to the nitty-gritty details, it is time for an unboxing montage, so you know exactly what you get for your hard-earned money. The pedals are seemingly unchanged from the original V9. From left to right, there is a clutch, brake and accelerator. All feature Hall magnetic sensors to account for foot force. Rivals around this price point typically do not have a clutch, including PXN's own V900 Gen2 and V3 Pro. You get metal coverings and a fold-out plastic base for grip. Spacing between the pedals is sufficient enough for all but Bigfoot. However, the lack of pedal position adjustability might be an issue for some. Numerous rubber pads on the pedal base keep the pedals still on wood and laminate, but may struggle on carpet without the addition of carpet spikes. There are no screw holes to mount the pedal base to a sim rig or wheel stand without either Velcro, improvisation, drilling, or a mixture of all three. Flex can be felt in the pedal arm, while the metal spring arrangement for pedal resistance and rebound is somewhat crude, though that also means it is probably more easily repairable. Next, the mostly plastic 6+1 gear shifter, named so because you get 6 forward gears and reverse, which is accessible by pushing down on the gear knob and going into 6th. Behind the stick are 2 buttons. One is for swapping between high and low gears, and the other for operating the handbrake. Both can be assigned to other functions. As for the V99 and V10 metal gaiter, it has been replaced by a rubber cover. Better for keeping dust and liquid at bay, no doubt. However, you could argue it looks less race car and more typical runaround. For fixing the gear stick to a solid surface, there is an inbuilt plastic clamp. The maximum thickness it can accommodate is 48mm or 1.89 inches, 12mm or 0.47 inches less than the steering wheel clamps I shall talk about shortly. Removing the clamp base allows you to directly attach the 6+1 shifter to any surface more convincingly, using the 4 black screws removed in the process, though you will likely need to get the drill out again. While the cable extending from the 6+1 shifter is non-detachable for the V9 Gen2 as it was the V9, the former now has a newer Type-C connection on the other end, as opposed to the more common USB male or Type-B. Not that it matters much, as neither the shifter nor the pedals can be connected directly to PC or console, meaning you will always have to connect them directly to the wheelbase. PXN Wheel App exists for fine-tuning settings from the comfort of a tablet or smartphone. It is available on Android and iOS. Search for PXN Wheel, then download, install, and open the app. Functionality includes firmware updates, if available, instruction manual access, maximum wheel rotation adjustment, vibration level, customizing or disabling the lighting, assignment of buttons, and the ability to apply game-specific configurations, such as for Euro Truck Simulator 2. All you have to do is enable Bluetooth on your phone or tablet, and connect the PXN V9 Gen2 steering wheel. I find the pre-made configurations I tested mostly work well. I just wish there were more of them, as on PC you usually need to assign all buttons manually, and the process varies from game to game. A usually tedious and slow process, but at least you do not need to do it often. Last but not least, the 28cm or 11-inch steering wheel and wheelbase. How do the V9 Gen2 and V9 differ? Well, both are plastic fantastic, but feel hardy and comfortable in use. Both offer 900 degrees of wheel rotation, both have a rubber rim, and both are grey with a ring of blue metallic. Sexy. Both also feature the usual array of Xbox-inspired buttons and lengthy plastic R&L flappy paddles behind the wheel for gear changes, not 4 paddles as on the V99 and V10. Though largely similar in design, you may have noticed the V9 Gen2 directional pad is now grey, and the 3R and 3L buttons sit in a straight line as opposed to a gentle curve. The program share options and mode buttons have also been changed from a vertical arrangement below the round insert with 6 bolts to a horizontal arrangement in a rectangular centre. I would assume the RGB feature makes adding a custom wheel more difficult, or perhaps impossible. Both the V9 Gen2 and V9 also work with multiple gaming platforms, specifically PC, PS4, Xbox Series X, Series S, and Xbox One, but not PS5. As with the V99 and V10, officially you need the separate N5 accessory. Both also feature a slider button for switching between 270 and 900 degrees of rotation. This is useful if you often jump between games with fast steering, such as F1 2024, to slow steering, such as SnowRunner. Unique to the V9 Gen2 are RGB lights, which PXN describes as dazzling and gorgeous. While I would not use those exact words, they do add visual interest and can indicate your current brake or throttle force. Hardly practical for real-time use, admittedly, but it does show whether an input has been recognized. Useful for setup. Then there is inbuilt vibration. Think of it as akin to true force used in the Logitech G923. While not as useful as true force feedback, it can convey the feeling of uneven surfaces and collisions. Another feature from the older V9 are the 2 plastic clamps that slot into the base. The maximum clearance is 60mm or 2.36 inches, with the 4 underside suction cups fitted. Any more than that and the clamp heads pop off. Said clamps are much taller and less discreet than what you get in the V9 and V10 box. This can be an issue on lower and thicker desks or for taller folk. As for the wheelbase, there are 5 rear connections, same as the V9. However, the 3.5mm headset port is gone, the pedals also use a Type-C connection instead of Ethernet, and the USB power cable is now braided and detachable as opposed to fixed. Setup is easy, as every connection is labeled. When playing on console, just remember to attach a controller for full steering wheel functionality, using the included Type-C or micro USB cables. As for sim rig or stand mounting, you will once again have to go the custom route, as there are no standard screw holes in the wheelbase. Not that someone with a fancy sim rig is the target market. While I cannot test on PS4 or PS5, I fired up my Xbox Series X to see if the V9 Gen2 is as plug and play as PXN claims. As it turns out, setup is mostly seamless. Simply connect your controller to the steering wheel and wheelbase to the console, and away you go. Just avoid using an Xbox One controller and Type-A cable with a Series X, as that did not work for me. Apart from some unresponsive button moments, perhaps the fault of Forza Horizon 5 and Grid Legends, the V9 Gen2 is mostly great. Specific driving impressions in just a second. That said, there was a weird instance where the steering seemed stuck and the directional pad seemed to have a life of its own during a Forza Horizon 5 session. Fortunately, unplugging and replugging resolves the issue. So how good is the PXN V9 Gen2 in a variety of driving games, despite the lack of force feedback? Let us find out, but a quick word about usage. Input is the default mode and works more often than not. As such, this should be your first port of call for most PC driving games. Start by using the PXN configurations within the PXN Wheel App. Failing that, you can try X input, the equivalent to a controller. Hold the mode button for 3 seconds until the light turns from red to purple. You can swap back using the same method. Also ensure the game control method is set to steering wheel and not controller. If applicable, run any game-specific control configuration wizard and select 900 degrees of rotation unless playing something specific. Be mindful too of the wheel sensitivity setting. To increase or decrease, hold the program button until you see the red LED flash quickly. This indicates you can now press up for high, left for medium, or down for low on the grey directional pad. If steering feels twitchy, try the 2 weaker settings. If things feel lethargic, use medium or high. You can also consider reducing the rotation total or slide the button over to 270 degrees. Playing a variety of racing games on PC, I noticed the PXN V9 Gen2 provides little communication between your hands and the digital surface you are driving on, which makes sense as there is no strong motor like in the V10 and V99. With that said, depending on the game, you can at least tell between smooth tarmac and lumpy bumpy gravel through vibration. In faster games, the lack of force feedback means I doubt you will be setting world record times. You can, however, remain competitive against the AI, even though the brake is a bit on and off and less delicate. In EA Sports WRC, it is possible to rotate the car using braking and acceleration, while the steering feels accurate and responsive. It is the same with Dirt Rally 2.0, especially with the manual shifter giving more gear control and involvement. Grid Legends on Xbox Series X, meanwhile, particularly suits the V9 Gen2. Arcade-ish thrills lets you chuck cars around with little consequence, though the V9 Gen2 is more than up for the job of brushing apexes. Forza Horizon 5 on Xbox is similarly plug and play. Again, the brake pedal can cause instant lockup if uncareful. Fortunately, in-game settings can be used to ease the issue. Slower games such as Euro Truck Simulator 2 feel at home on the V9 Gen2, as does slow and steady SnowRunner. Manhandling the steering during tricky inclines while using AWD and diff lock really does bring the off-road simulator to life. Even in F124, wet conditions and all, I am able to maintain a reasonable pace, though it takes more effort than when using the V99 and V10. The first negative of the V9 Gen2 is some backward and forward flex if you manhandle the wheel rim. Luckily, it is not felt during rotation, so is more of a longevity concern than one of functionality. Flex can also be seen in the plastic clamps. You really do not want to overdo tightening, though there is no need to, as the 5 suction cups aid grip and there is no motor torque to contend with. Points are also lost for the pedals, which can be fully depressed with a pinky finger. There is no noticeable differentiation, which is fine for the accelerator and clutch, but less so for the brake. For anyone craving muscle memory, precision and sturdiness, the V9 Gen2 pedals are not the one. Though with practice, the Hall magnetic sensors allow for a level of precision if light-footed. The shifter, meanwhile, is fit for purpose, though like some real-life gearboxes, it has a wallowy softness to it, and the distance between gears is more town car than sports car. Overall, I appreciate the extra immersion in games where it can be used, such as Assetto Corsa and Dirt Rally 2.0. What about for night owl gamers? Well, it is a supremely quiet wheel. The Clicking from the pedals is most noticeable, though there is probably a way to declick those or simply reassign their function elsewhere. Most annoying are moments in EA Sports WRC where you jump out of a game while driving, as if a click has registered outside the operating area. As with the V99, I also saw blue screen of death misery when exiting some games in Steam, which is not ideal. PXN should rule out whether it is to blame, especially as my Xbox Series X also crashed a few times. For a casual or younger gamer, at a competitive price, the V9 Gen2 is worth considering. Having 3 pedals and a proper shifter really immerses you into driving, though it depends on the game developer whether full functionality can be used. There really is little you can throw at the budget PXN that it cannot handle, as my video hopefully shows. I admit it is easier to drive fast with force feedback, yet with practice, the V9 Gen2 can hold its own and is a more comprehensive and better value package than its entry-level rivals. Don't get me wrong, the Logitech G920, G29 and G923, or Thrustmaster T248, T128, or the Ferrari Edition make a strong case, but I would not say they make driving games more fun, nor is the V9 Gen2 especially inferior in practice. In summary then, the V9 Gen2 builds on the original V9 sufficiently and is enjoyable to use despite a few issues, regressions, and the lack of force feedback. That's it for my PXN V9 Gen2 review. Like and subscribe and maybe even donate to the cause. Thank you for watching. Take care. Bye.